Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight we begin a journey into a world where honor ruled every breath, where the weight of a name was heavier than steel, and where love often lived in the shadows. Let me take you there. Echizen Province, the year 1598. The war-torn land was beginning to heal, but inside the great houses of the samurai, battles of a different kind still burned. The estate of the Takeda clan stretched across a pine-covered valley, its tiled rooftops glistening beneath the pale dawn light. Lanterns still smouldered at the gates, their smoke rising like prayers to the morning sky. Within the inner courtyard stood Takeda Haru, just 16 years old, his back straight, his face composed, his heart anything but steady. He was the heir. Every retainer, every servant, every rival who looked upon him saw not a boy, but the weight of generations. His hair had been bound in a proper topknot that morning, his robes laid out in black silk stitched with the crest of his family. Yet inside, Haru still felt the raw restlessness of youth. He knew little of war, less of love, and yet the path of his life had already been carved for him by men long dead. His father, Takeda Masanobu, once a fierce general, now leaned on a staff as illness gnawed at his body. The clan council whispered of alliances and lands, and already they spoke of Haru not as a child but as the next lord. An arranged marriage had been secured with the daughter of a distant ally. Haru had never seen her, never heard her voice, but she was to be his wife. The thought settled like a stone in his chest. Bushido demanded silence from him. Duty demanded obedience. But in the secret corners of his heart, Haru longed for something more than treaties and heirs. He longed for a voice, a touch, something unbound by politics. That morning, after bowing in the audience hall, he stepped into the training yard where General Katsuro waited. The old warrior's eyes were sharp, his stance still strong though his beard was silvered. The two sparred with wooden swords, the rhythm of strikes echoing against the paper screens. Katsuro drove him back again and again until Haru's arms burned with effort. "You fight with fire," Katsuro said, lowering his weapon at last. "But fire alone cannot carry a man. It must be tempered." Haru steadied his breath. "And the heart, master? Must that be tempered as well?" The general studied him for a long moment. His voice softened, almost weary. "The heart is a warrior's sharpest blade, and his most dangerous weakness." The words struck deeper than any blow. Haru felt their truth keenly. He bowed, hiding the turmoil in his chest. That night, lying in the stillness of his chamber, Haru reached for brush and paper. His hand trembled as ink bled into the fibres, shaping words he dared not speak aloud. What is a man's name but a chain wrapped in silence? Yet still the heart beats, longing for a voice to hear, a hand to linger, unseen. He folded the poem and slipped it beneath his pillow. Outside, the cicadas hummed in the summer dark. Inside, the air of the Takeda lay awake, feeling the full weight of the name he carried, its honour, its chains and its shadow, over every secret desire he would ever hold. The clang of wooden swords echoed through the yard, a rhythm older than Haru himself. Morning mist still clung to the stones, curling around the feet of the two figures circling one another. General Katsuro moved with a grace that belied his age, each strike precise, his stance rooted in decades of blood and discipline. Haru's arms burned with the effort of blocking, his breaths ragged. Yet his mentor gave no mercy. Another strike came, and another, until Haru stumbled back, his wooden blade slipping from his hand to clatter against the stones. "Again," Katsuro said. His voice was not cruel, but it carried the weight of expectation. Haru retrieved the weapon, sweat dripping into his eyes. He struck forward, only to be caught and thrown to the ground with a twist of the general's wrist. Pinned, staring up at the blue sky, Haru wanted to curse. Instead, he swallowed his pride and whispered, I lack your skill." Katsuro studied him in silence before stepping back, offering his hand. Haru took it, rising unsteadily to his feet. Skill comes with time, but strength of heart. The general's eyes lingered on him. That is forged in moments such as these. The words unsettled Haru, for he heard in them more than a lesson in combat. That evening, after training, they sat beneath the eaves of the dojo. Cicadas droned, and the faint smell of pine smoke drifted on the air. Katsuro poured sake into 2 cups, handing one to Haru. The boy accepted it with both hands, hesitant but honoured. "You are near manhood," Katsuro said, sipping his drink, "and with manhood comes not only duty, but choices." Haru frowned. "My choices are already made. My wife has been chosen. My path is set." A small smile tugged at the corners of Katsuro's mouth, though his eyes held no amusement. "That is one kind of path, yes. But there are others, Haru. Paths between men. Bonds forged in loyalty, tested in battle, strengthened in trust." He paused, his gaze lingering. "Do you understand what I mean?" Heat rose to Haru's cheeks. He had heard whispers in the corridors, seen glances exchanged between older samurai and their attendants, but never had it been spoken so openly. His heart beat faster, not with shame, but with a strange, sharp curiosity. "I think I do," Haru murmured. Katsuro leaned back, his cup balanced in his hand. "The code of Wakashudo is as old as the sword itself. A boy learns not only discipline but devotion. A man learns not only to lead, but to love with honour. Such bonds make warriors stronger." His voice grew quieter. "But they can also undo them." Haru thought of the poem hidden beneath his pillow, the words of his restless heart. He thought of the weight of his name, the bride he had never met, the chains of duty tightening around him. And here, for the first time, was the suggestion of another path. One dangerous perhaps, but alive with the warmth of choice. He dared a glance at Katsuro. The old general's face was half hidden in shadow, but his eyes burned with something that unsettled and drew Haru all at once. That night, when Haru returned to his chambers, the silence seemed louder than before. He lay awake, feeling the imprint of his mentor's words upon his heart. Between duty and desire a crack had opened, and through it light seeped in. Lanterns swayed above the great hall, their orange glow softening the sharp edges of armour and silk. The scent of incense mingled with roasted fish and sweet rice, filling the air with warmth that belied the tension beneath it. For the first time, Takeda Haru was invited not as a boy to sit in the shadows, but as heir to his clan's name. Every seat around the banquet mat seemed to weigh upon him. The retainers, the elders, the visiting nobles, all eyes shifted now and then to study the youth who would one day lead. He bowed low, moving with practiced precision, though his palms itched with nervousness. His father sat at the head, silent, his illness hidden behind rigid posture. Yet it was clear to all. Soon the burdens of alliance and legacy would pass to Haru. Music began, the twang of shamisen strings played by women in flowing robes. Cups of sake were poured, each gesture precise, a dance of sleeves and lacquer. Laughter echoed in pockets, but behind the merriment ran an undercurrent of calculation. Every word was weighed, every smile measured. Haru found himself seated near the son of a neighbouring daimyo, older by a few years, his hair perfectly bound, his eyes sharp. The young man leaned closer as sake warmed the evening. "So, the Takeda heir joins us at last," he murmured. "Your name precedes you, Haru. Tell me, do you fight as fiercely as they say, or do you leave that to your men?" The question stung like a blade hidden in silk. Haru kept his expression calm, replying softly, "A leader must be both shield and sword. Words, as well as steel, win battles." The other smiled, tilting his cup. "Spoken like a man of promise. Perhaps one day we shall test each other, on the field or otherwise." His gaze lingered a moment longer than courtesy required, a look heavy with meaning. Haru felt a strange twist in his chest. In this hall, affection and challenge seemed to blur together, cloaked in ritual and sake. Every glance was a question, every smile a weapon. Later, as the banquet swelled, dancers entered the hall. Their movements were fluid, fans snapping open and shut like secret codes. Haru watched as the courtiers around him responded in kind. A flick of a sleeve here, a tilt of the head there. Silent messages passed in plain sight. He realized then that the court was not just a place of politics, but of hidden passions. When the performance ended, Haru's gaze caught upon a figure across the room. A young woman, her hair shining like ink in the lantern glow. She met his eyes for the briefest moment, then looked away, her expression unreadable. Was she the one, the bride promised to him, or another pawn in the game? Katsuro, standing behind him as an attendant, bent low to whisper, "Remember, Haru, every banquet is a battlefield. Tonight you do not wield your sword, but your silence." Haru sipped his sake, heart pounding. He understood then that court life was no less dangerous than combat. Here, intimacy was currency. Desire was played like a flute, sometimes soft, sometimes shrill, but always in service of power. And as the night deepened, Haru realized he was stepping into a world where the boundaries between love, loyalty, and ambition blurred into shadow. The corridors of the Takeda estate were quiet at night, the only sound the soft padding of bare feet over polished wood. Haru had long since learned the rhythms of his household, the moments when servants whispered, the shadows where footsteps paused, and the secret ways the world continued after the lords had retired. It was in one of these quiet moments that Akio, his personal page, appeared at the edge of the tatami, bowing low. Akio was 14, slight of frame, with eyes that always seemed to catch Haru's in fleeting glances, full of curiosity and something unspoken. "Haru-sama." Akio's voice trembled. The boy's hands were folded in front of him, a mixture of respect and fear in his posture. "May I speak freely?" Haru inclined his head. "Yes." Speak. Akio swallowed, then stepped closer, the lantern light casting soft shadows across his face. I have served you since childhood. I have watched, learned, and cared. Not just as a page should care for his master, but more." Haru's breath caught. He had felt it too. The quiet attentions, the small touches that lingered longer than propriety demanded. The way Akio's gaze held him a moment too long, yet hearing it spoken aloud made his chest tighten. "More?" Haru asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Yes, Haru-sama. I wish to be near you. To serve, yes, but also to be with you. Only if you would allow it." Akio's cheeks flushed crimson, and his hands trembled. The world seemed to pause. Outside, the wind rustled the pine trees, carrying the faint scent of evening incense. Inside, Haru's mind raced. Duty, honour, and expectation warred with the warmth rising in his chest. His mentor's words echoed in his memory. The heart is a warrior's sharpest blade. And his most dangerous weakness, Haru studied Akio, seeing in him both innocence and courage, and the possibility of a connection that defied the strict rules of the household. Slowly he reached out, letting his hand hover near Akio's. The boy's eyes widened, a mixture of hope and fear. "Come," Haru said softly. "Sit. But know this. What we share must remain hidden. The house watches, the clan watches. The world beyond these walls does not understand what lies between hearts." Akio nodded, relief and longing mingling in his expression. They sat together, the silence thick but comforting, filled with the unspoken understanding of their shared danger and desire. Haru realized that intimacy could be both a sanctuary and a risk, a tender rebellion against the chains of his name. That night, as Akio departed to his quarters, Haru lay awake, feeling the new weight of connection. duty demanded obedience to his father, to the clan, to the alliances arranged long before his birth. Yet now, for the first time, he also carried another kind of responsibility, the fragile, secret bond of the heart. He pressed a hand to the folded paper beneath his pillow, the poem still hidden, and thought, perhaps strength was not only forged in the clash of swords or the cold edge of duty, but also in the courage to care, to desire, to risk the unseen. The night deepened, and the estate seemed to exhale in quiet approval, or perhaps warning. Haru did not yet know which, but in that stillness he understood something fundamental. Intimacy, like honour, could shape a man more profoundly than any battlefield. The morning after Akio's confession, the Takeda estate seemed heavier somehow, as though the walls themselves remembered what had been spoken in the quiet of the night. Haru moved through the corridors with his usual discipline, yet each step reminded him of the delicate, unspoken bond he now carried, a secret warmth tucked alongside the relentless weight of his name. He found his father in the audience hall, seated more rigidly than usual, his cane resting across his knees. A retainer bowed, announcing the arrival of envoys from the neighbouring province, the family of Haru's betrothed. The air shifted, thick with the gravity of expectation. Haru's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with that peculiar mixture of dread and curiosity he had first felt when Akio had spoken. Duty would now demand the fullest of his attention. Personal desire, however tender, had to recede into shadow. The envoys entered, their steps measured, their faces polite but unreadable. With them was Lady Ayame, the daughter promised to him in marriage. She was barely 16, her expression calm and serene, yet her eyes flickered with quiet intelligence. She bowed low, her hands folded neatly in her sleeves. Haru returned the bow, noting the subtle confidence in her posture. Words were exchanged, polite inquiries about health, harvest, and alliances. The conversation moved like a carefully choreographed dance, each gesture precise, each smile measured. Haru listened, responding with courtesy, yet his mind kept returning to the night before. Akio's trembling words, the risk and tenderness of that fleeting intimacy. After the formalities, they walked together in the courtyard, stepping around lantern-lit koi ponds. Ayame's voice was soft but sure. "I have been told much about you, Haru-sama, about the strength and wisdom of your family. I hope we may come to understand one another, not just as duty requires, but as people." Haru nodded, struck by the unusual candour. "I hope so as well, Lady Ayame. And perhaps we will find some measure of friendship, even in duty." The afternoon passed in similar formality, yet each glance and measured word carried undercurrents of something more. For Haru, the contrast was impossible to ignore, the restrained public intimacy of courtly relations versus the private, unspoken bond with Akio that still lingered in his chest. That evening, after the envoys departed, Haru sat in his chambers with Akio silently observing. The page's presence was comforting, yet the tension between duty and desire pressed ever closer. "Tomorrow we formalize it," Haru murmured, almost to himself. "The union that will define much of my life." Akio's eyes lowered. "I understand, Haru-sama." Haru sighed. "It is not a choice of the heart, but it is still part of the path I must walk." The candlelight flickered across his face, casting long shadows against the walls. Haru pressed his hand to the hidden poem beneath his pillow, feeling the steady pulse of his secret, forbidden longing. He knew that love and duty were not always allies, and that the coming days would test the strength of his heart as sharply as any sword could test his skill. Outside, the cicadas sang again, their voices steady and unyielding, a reminder that the world continued, indifferent to the quiet battles of the heart within polished halls. The dawn light seeped softly through the sliding paper doors, painting the tatami in muted gold. Haru rose, as he always did, with the weight of expectation pressing on his shoulders. Today, however, the weight felt different, tangled with anticipation, curiosity, and the quiet unrest of a heart already occupied. Lady Ayami had arrived the evening before, escorted through the main gates with the elegance of a procession that spoke of status and propriety. Her white silk robes had shimmered in the lantern light, embroidered with silver cranes, symbols of longevity and loyalty. Even then, Haru had felt a pang, beauty intertwined with distance, admiration tempered by duty. Now, in the privacy of the inner chambers, the full reality of their union settled around him. Ayami knelt gracefully, hands folded, eyes cast downward in humility and respect. "Haru-sama," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I hope to serve not just your house, but your heart as well." Haru hesitated. The words were careful, delicate, yet unmistakably personal. He had been trained to respond with formality, yet something in her tone made formality feel inadequate. "You honour me with your words," he said slowly, "but our path is one of duty first. Let us grow to understand one another. In time." A faint smile flickered across her lips, and for a moment Haru glimpsed a spark of life beyond the constraints of ceremony. The silk of her sleeves brushed against the tatami as she shifted closer, and the scent of her presence, soft incense, pine, and warmth, filled the small space. The initial nights of their union were quiet, restrained. Haru followed the rituals he'd been taught, careful to honour Ayame without overstepping, careful to maintain the invisible boundaries dictated by both etiquette and conscience. Yet in those moments, small gestures began to carry meaning. The way she met his gaze without fear, the subtle tilt of her head as she spoke, the way her hand lingered ever so slightly when passing a cup. Haru felt the strange, tentative stirrings of something unfamiliar. Respect, curiosity, perhaps even the beginnings of affection, but always tempered by duty, always watched by the invisible eyes of history and family expectation. After the evening meal, he retired to his private chamber. Akio, faithful as ever, bowed low at the doorway. Haru's thoughts flickered briefly to the boy, the comfort, the secrecy, the hidden warmth, but he pushed it aside. Tonight was about navigating a different kind of intimacy, measured, deliberate, and as fragile as the fine silk that Ayami wore. He poured sake into 2 cups and handed one to her, an offering of companionship, not passion. She accepted it with grace, her eyes meeting his for a heartbeat longer than propriety allowed. And in that heartbeat, Haru sensed the possibility of connection, a seed planted in the fertile soil of obligation and understanding. When Ayami finally retired, Haru sat alone, the candlelight flickering against the walls, the weight of the Takeda name pressed down as it always had, but now it was accompanied by the quiet, complex presence of another heart, one he could see, touch, and learn to respect, if not yet fully love. Outside, the cicadas continued their ceaseless song, a reminder that time moved on, carrying all its obligations, its quiet passions, and its unspoken yearnings. Haru closed his eyes, feeling both the chains of duty and the first fragile stirrings of tenderness, knowing that both would shape him in ways he could not yet imagine. The morning sun filtered through the rice paper screens, casting delicate patterns across the polished tatami. In the quiet of the inner chambers, Haru watched as Ayame moved with practiced elegance, her white silk sleeves whispering against the floor. Each gesture, each tilt of her head, seemed deliberate yet natural, a subtle choreography that spoke volumes without a single word. Haru had begun to notice the nuances of courtly communication, how a glance could challenge, a bow could reassure, and the flick of a fan could signal interest or disapproval. The women of the household, trained in the art of subtlety, wielded these gestures like weapons as sharp as any blade. Ayame, he realized, was no exception. During breakfast, a retainer delivered news of an upcoming gathering of allied families. The women of the court would be present, each observing, each evaluating. Ayame listened carefully, her eyes glancing at him only once before returning to her tea, her silence a signal he had learned to interpret. Calm, attentive, prepared. As the day progressed, Haru watched her interact with the ladies in waiting. A folded fan flicked in the air, a soft laugh barely audible. These were not idle actions. Each movement carried meaning, a coded language of intention, caution, or subtle persuasion. In this world, one could not rely solely on words. Every expression, every motion was a thread in the intricate tapestry of alliances and desire. Ayame approached Haru later, stepping lightly across the courtyard. She handed him a small scroll, neatly folded and sealed. He opened it, finding a short poem. In the hush of morning, silk brushes the floor, and hearts speak softly between shadows of duty. Haru felt the weight of her words. They were polite, restrained, but unmistakably personal. A message delivered in the delicate medium of poetry, safe from prying eyes yet full of meaning for him alone. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines, Haru and Ayame shared a rare moment of quiet conversation. Her voice was calm, measured, yet carried a gentle warmth. She spoke not of duty, but of small pleasures, the way sunlight fell on the courtyard, the scent of pine after rain, the taste of new tea leaves. In these moments, Haru sensed a bridge forming between them, delicate, fragile, but real. Even in private, the lessons of courtly subtlety were present. Ayame's gestures, her pauses, her choice of words, all reflected a woman navigating a world where power and desire were intertwined, where influence could be exerted through silence as much as speech. Haru began to understand that intimacy was not always direct or physical. Sometimes it was measured glances, carefully chosen words, and shared moments unnoticed by others. As night fell, he returned to his chambers, the poem folded neatly in his sleeve. Akio's quiet presence reminded him of the other bond he carried in secrecy. Duty and desire, public and private, woven together like threads in an intricate silk tapestry. Haru realized that understanding the language of the court, and the women within it, would be as important as any lesson in swordsmanship. Outside, the cicadas continued their ceaseless chorus, carrying the day into night. And in the quiet between their songs, Haru felt the first true stirrings of respect, curiosity, and perhaps even affection, directed toward the bride he had once seen only as a duty to fulfill. The early morning mist hung low over the courtyard, curling around stone lanterns and the koi pond like whispered secrets. Haru rose with the steady precision of a man trained in discipline, yet the news delivered by a retainer had stirred something restless in his chest. A concubine had been assigned to his household, a young woman named Kiyomi, chosen not for politics but for her beauty, intelligence, and the promise of producing heirs. Kiyomi arrived under the careful guidance of her attendants, her kimono, a deep crimson embroidered with gold phoenixes. Her presence immediately shifted the atmosphere of the inner chambers. Even the women of the household, skilled in subtleties, noted her grace and the faint, deliberate confidence in her posture. Haru greeted her formally, as the customs demanded, yet he could not ignore the stirrings of curiosity and something sharper, more personal, in his chest. Kiyomi's voice was soft, melodic, carrying the quiet strength of someone who understood the boundaries of her role yet had her own thoughts and will. "Lord Haru," she said, bowing low, "I am honoured to serve both you and your house." Haru inclined his head. "You are welcome here. Your presence is for the benefit of the clan, but I hope that your life here may also bring you peace." Kiyomi's eyes flickered briefly with understanding. Or was it mischief? And she lowered her gaze. That single glance, brief as it was, seemed to communicate more than words could convey. Over the following days, Kiyomi settled into the rhythms of the household with quiet elegance. She attended to her duties with diligence, yet Haru noticed moments that betrayed her individuality. A soft smile at the flick of a servant's sleeve, a gentle humming of a song as she arranged the screens, a quick glance that lingered just a heartbeat too long when meeting his eyes. In the evenings, she would sit nearby during meals or study, not formally, not intrusively, but in a way that invited connection. Haru found himself drawn to her presence, her voice, her movements, the subtle warmth of a companion who existed in that delicate space between formal duty and private life. Ayame, ever observant, noticed Kiyomi's influence on Haru, though she did not speak of it. The bride's silences carried their own weight, her expressions measured yet telling. Haru felt the fragile tensions forming within his household, duty to the clan, loyalty to his wife, and the undeniable pull of desire that Kiyomi's presence awakened. One evening, Kiyomi approached Haru in the gardens, the moon casting silver light across the pond. She began to sing softly, a tune of her own making, delicate, haunting, full of emotion she could not yet name. The melody wrapped around the quiet night like a gentle flame, drawing Haru's attention and something deeper in his heart. "Your song," he murmured, unable to mask the admiration. Kiyomi's eyes met his, steady and clear. "It is for those who hear it," she replied, "and for those who may need it most." Haru felt a rush of conflicting emotions, fascination, admiration, guilt, and the undeniable pull of desire. Here was a bond different from the tender secrecy of Akio, different from the restrained grace of Ayame. It was immediate, visceral, yet tempered by the awareness that every movement, every word carried the weight of expectation. That night, Haru retired to his chamber, the song still echoing in his mind. The cicadas outside seemed quieter somehow, as though giving space to the complex rhythm of his household. He pressed a hand to the hidden poem beneath his pillow, feeling the subtle intertwining of loyalty, affection, and desire shaping the man he was becoming. In this house, intimacy came in many forms, some public, some private, some dangerous, some tender. And Haru was learning slowly that the heart could hold them all, if one dared to listen. The moon hung low over the Takeda estate, spilling silver light across the quiet courtyard. Inside her chamber, Ayame sat at a small lacquered desk, brush poised above a sheet of fine paper. The room was still, save for the soft rustle of silk as she shifted in her seat and the distant hum of cicadas outside. Her hand trembled slightly as she began to write, each stroke measured, deliberate. These letters were never meant to leave her chamber, never meant for eyes other than her own, but they were her confession, her release. "Haru-sama," she wrote. "I watch him move through his day with the weight of the world upon him. I wonder if he feels the same stirrings of unease I do, if he longs for something beyond duty, as I sometimes long for what cannot be spoken." She paused, dipping her brush into ink again. "I wish to know him, truly. Not as the head of the Takeda, not as the husband chosen by arrangement, but as the man beneath the armour. And yet, I fear my words may reach only the empty page." Across the courtyard, in her own chamber, Kiyomi performed a similar ritual. Her letters were smaller, more restrained, careful not to betray her place in the household, yet the words carried the weight of her longing, her awareness of the fragile boundaries she navigated each day. "Haru-sama," Kiyomi wrote, "your presence lingers in ways I cannot speak aloud. I see the restraint in your eyes, the burden you carry, and I wonder if my song reaches even a fraction of what I feel. I do not seek to tempt, only to share the quiet understanding that passes between us in the silence of evening." The two women, unknowingly, mirrored one another. Letters unsent, words unspoken, hearts held in secret tension with duty and desire. Haru, meanwhile, sat alone in his chamber, unaware of the letters being written for him, but feeling the subtle weight of attention that surrounded him. Akio's quiet loyalty, Ayame's measured grace, Kiyomi's haunting presence, all these threads intertwined, shaping his days, his thoughts, his very sense of self. Later that night, Ayame and Kiyomi's paths crossed briefly in the corridor, their eyes meeting in a moment of unspoken recognition. Neither spoke. Both knew the delicate balance of affection, respect, and restraint that defined their lives in this household. The letters remained folded and hidden, their words preserved like fragile petals pressed between the pages of a book. They were a reminder that intimacy did not always require action, that desire could exist in the mind as powerfully as it could in touch, and that silence, in its own way, was a language all its own. Haru lay awake in the stillness, unaware of the correspondence, yet feeling the subtle currents of connection pulling him in multiple directions. Duty, desire, loyalty, and longing all flowed through him like water through channels he could neither see nor control. Outside, the cicadas continued their unceasing song, indifferent to the small human dramas unfolding beneath the roofed halls. Yet within those walls hearts beat in secret, words unspoken, and lives quietly entwined in the intricate dance of intimacy, honour, and unacknowledged desire. Moonlight spilled across the Takeda estate gardens, painting the koi pond in silver and shadow. Lanterns flickered along the stone path, casting elongated shapes that moved like whispers in the night. Haru walked slowly, the cool air heavy with the scent of pine and blooming jasmine, every sound magnified in the stillness. He had chosen this hour deliberately, late enough that the household would be silent, early enough that the night had not yet surrendered to the hum of morning activity. It was a time for observation, reflection, and rare moments of solitude that were increasingly scarce in his life. As he reached the far end of the garden, he found Ayame seated on a low stone bench. Her white silk robes glimmered softly, her posture calm but deliberate. She'd been here for some time, he realized, listening perhaps, waiting, or simply seeking her own space away from the duties and eyes of the household. "Haru-sama," she said quietly, lifting her gaze. Her eyes held a flicker of curiosity and something more, an invitation, careful and measured. "Lady Ayame," he replied, bowing slightly. "The night is calm tonight. I did not expect company." She smiled faintly. "Nor I. Yet here we are." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the gentle ripple of water in the pond and the distant rustle of pine needles. Words felt inadequate, heavy with the weight of etiquette and expectation. Haru found himself observing the way the lantern light caught the folds of her sleeves, the subtle movement of her hands, the soft rhythm of her breathing. "You move through the day with the weight of your household upon you," Ayame said at last. "Do you ever find it burdensome?" Haru considered his answer carefully. Yes, yet also necessary. Duty is the path laid before us. The challenge is learning when to follow it and when to listen to the heart. Her gaze lingered on him, and for the first time he sensed a shared understanding, a connection beyond protocol, fragile but real. Later, as he turned to leave, he noticed a shadow moving softly among the hedges. Kiyomi emerged, her crimson robes muted in the moonlight. She did not speak at first, merely observing him with a calm intensity that spoke of patience and knowledge beyond her years. "Kiyomi," Haru said softly. "You wander the garden at this hour." She inclined her head. "I come to the quiet, and perhaps to see what escapes notice during the day." Her eyes met his, and he understood the unspoken message. Here, in the shadows, one could observe, one could connect, one could feel. Haru nodded. Words were unnecessary. The shared space, the measured presence, the understanding of boundaries and yet the closeness. They spoke louder than any formal statement could. He left the garden then, the lanterns fading behind him, yet the impression of the night lingered, the brush of silk, the quiet glances, the soft currents of connection that threaded through his household. Duty remained ever present, but in the shadows he had glimpsed something else: trust, desire, and the fragile beginnings of intimacy that could survive even the heaviest weight of expectation. As he returned to his chamber, he thought of Akio waiting quietly, loyal and steadfast. The three threads of his life, Ayame, Kiyomi, Akio, wove together in a delicate, precarious pattern. One misstep, and the balance could shatter. Yet in this night garden, he understood that the human heart could hold contradictions, that honour and desire could coexist, if only one moved carefully through the shadows. Outside, the cicada's song continued unceasingly, a reminder that time and life moved forward regardless of the hidden currents of the heart. Inside, Haru's own pulse echoed with the quiet rhythm of a warrior, learning not only to wield the sword, but to navigate the fragile art of intimacy in a world of duty, desire, and shadowed connections. The Takeda estate was quiet, yet the silence was deceptive. Within the inner chambers, the sliding paper screens hid more than walls. They hid glances, conversations, and small betrayals that could ripple through the household. Haru moved along the corridor after evening training, his wooden sandals echoing softly. He paused outside Ayame's chamber, noticing the faint glow of candlelight filtering beneath the screen. Voices drifted out, soft, careful, almost inaudible, but not meant for him. Curiosity, a dangerous companion, drew him closer. Through the thin paper, he discerned words, delicate and sharp, exchanged between Ayame and one of the elder ladies in waiting. They spoke not of trivialities, but of the household, its rhythms, its hidden tensions, and of him. The words carried admiration, yes, but also a subtle caution, the recognition of a young lord whose heart and desires were not entirely contained by etiquette. Haru stepped back, retreating to the shadows, heart quickened. He understood then that the household watched, analysed, and interpreted every nuance of his behaviour. Even love, even desire could become a weapon or a liability when misread or revealed too soon. Moments later, in a distant wing of the estate, Kiyomi whispered her own confidences to a young attendant, her crimson sleeves brushing the floor. She spoke softly of Haru's presence, of the stirrings in the household, and of the delicate dance she performed daily, balancing duty, observation, and longing. Unseen, Haru realised how intricate the web around him had become. His private connection with Akio, the subtle understanding building with Ayame, the quiet allure of Kiyomi, all existed alongside the watchful eyes of the household. Every step, every glance, every choice could ignite suspicion or admiration. That night, as he returned to his chambers, he found Akio kneeling quietly, brush in hand. The page's eyes lifted, meeting his with the familiar blend of loyalty and something unspoken. "Did you see?" Akio asked softly. "Only enough," Haru replied. "The household is never idle. Every whisper carries meaning," Akio nodded. "And we must walk carefully, lest the balance tip." Haru's thoughts drifted to the hidden letters, the secret poems, and the stolen moments in the garden. Desire and duty, secrecy and observation were all threads woven into the fabric of this household. One wrong move could unravel the pattern entirely. Yet in the quiet of his chamber, Haru realised something important. He was not powerless. He could navigate these currents, listen to the whispers, and learn to act with intention. Desire need not be discarded, but it must be tempered. Duty need not be ignored, but it need not suppress the heart entirely. Outside, the cicada's song filled the night air with unceasing rhythm. Within the estate, shadows shifted behind screens, carrying whispers, watchful eyes, and secret longing. And Haru, at the centre of it all, understood that the true art of being a samurai noble lay not only in wielding a sword, but in understanding the fragile, intricate, and deeply human currents of the hearts around him. The night air shimmered with anticipation. Lanterns of every shape and colour floated above the village streets, casting golden reflections on the river and turning the water into a liquid mirror of light. Music and laughter swirled through the air. Flutes, drums, and the quiet murmur of families and nobles alike celebrating the season of light. Haru moved among the crowds with measured steps, Ayame walking beside him in her pristine white robes, lanterns tucked delicately in her hands. The bride's calm composure belied the awareness in her eyes, the careful scanning of faces, the subtle acknowledgement of glances that carried meaning beyond words. Kiyomi followed, a crimson ribbon in her hair catching the light, her presence quiet but magnetic. She moved with confidence, observing, listening, her gaze occasionally brushing Haru's in ways that both stirred and reminded him of the fragile balance he maintained. The festival was a lesson in duality, joy and observation, celebration and diplomacy, attraction and restraint. Nobles mingled with artisans, merchants and performers, while alliances were tested with polite bows and carefully chosen words. In the river's reflection, Haru saw the convergence of private and public, the mirrored faces of the people around him, and the hidden currents swirling beneath polite appearances. At a central pavilion, lanterns were released into the sky, drifting upward like glowing spirits. Haru, Ayame, and Kiyomi watched, each lost in thought. Haru's gaze alternated between the two women, Ayame's steady grace, Kiyomi's quiet allure, and the knowledge of Akio waiting silently in the shadows of the household, loyal and devoted. "Each lantern carries a wish," Ayame said softly, her voice almost drowned by the music. "But not all wishes are spoken aloud." Haru nodded, understanding the layers beneath her words. Wishes, desire, and duty, all intertwined in invisible threads, just like the ribbons of light floating into the night sky. Kiyomi approached, holding a lantern shaped like a phoenix. "Then let this one carry understanding," she whispered, her eyes meeting his, "and courage where it is needed." Haru's chest tightened. Desire, loyalty, duty, all converging in this fleeting moment of light. The festival, though public, had become a private stage for the hearts that beat in careful secrecy around him. Later, as the lanterns faded into the darkness, the crowd dissipated, leaving the estate quiet once more. Haru returned to the inner chambers, feeling the weight and warmth of the evening settle on him. The festival had reminded him of something vital. Beauty, joy, and connection could exist even amidst duty and restraint, but only if one dared to navigate the spaces between observation, desire, and honour. In the silent halls of his household, he paused, listening for the subtle rhythms of hearts around him, the quiet loyalty of Akio, the measured grace of Ayame, the enticing presence of Kiyomi. Each one was a note in a delicate composition, fragile yet resonant, and Haru knew that mastering this symphony would be as crucial as mastering the sword. Outside, cicadas still sang, their voices unceasing, carrying the night forward. Within, hearts whispered and pulsed, lanterns of longing and restraint glowing silently in the shadows. And Haru, at the centre of it all, understood the art of balance, the weight of his name, the desires he held, and the fragile luminous threads of intimacy he could not yet fully claim. The corridors of the Takeda estate were silent, save for the soft creak of sliding doors and the distant ripple of a lantern-lit garden outside. But silence rarely meant peace. Haru moved quietly, his footsteps muted against the polished wood, every sense alert. Shadows stretched along the walls, bending and twisting as if alive, echoing the tensions that simmered in the household. He paused outside the chambers of Ayame, sensing a movement beyond the screen. A faint voice, low and measured, drifted out, an exchange with one of the ladies in waiting. The words were careful, Yet Haru caught a hint of unease, a subtle warning. The household, it seemed, was attuned to the delicate shifts in his relationships, and whispers travelled faster than any footfall. Further down the corridor, the crimson glow of Kiyomi's chamber revealed another quiet encounter. She conversed softly with a maid, gestures restrained yet purposeful. Haru recognized the pattern. Observation, loyalty, subtle influence. Even kindness, he realized, could be wielded like a blade in this world of shadows. Akio appeared suddenly at the end of the hallway, kneeling slightly in the muted light. "Haru-sama," he whispered, "there are movements you should see. Moments that may shift the balance of hearts here." Haru's brow furrowed. "Do they speak openly?" "No, only in gestures, silences, and careful words behind screens. But the currents are strong tonight." He followed Akio to the landing where two courtiers had paused, exchanging polite bows that masked tension. Haru observed the interplay, the subtle stiffening of shoulders, the fleeting glance of curiosity, the unspoken messages hidden in smiles and inclinations. Every encounter carried meaning, and every misstep could unravel the fragile equilibrium of the household. Later, he returned to his chambers, the echoes of whispers and shuffling silk following him like ghosts. Akio knelt silently, awaiting guidance. Haru realized that the balance he had been striving to maintain between Ayame, Kiyomi, and the ever-watchful eyes of the household was shifting. Subtle rivalries were emerging, loyalty mingled with desire, and the shadows of jealousy began to stretch long and thin along the walls. He sat in silence, reflecting on the delicate web he inhabited. Intimacy and duty, desire and honour. They all moved like currents in the still water of the household. To act with wisdom, he knew, required patience, observation, and the courage to navigate unseen dangers. Outside, the cicada's relentless chorus continued, indifferent to the hidden tensions that simmered within the estate. But inside, every whispered word, every fleeting glance carried weight. Haru understood that the true mastery of his position and his heart would not come from the sword alone, but from navigating the shadows, understanding the unseen, and balancing the fragile desires of those bound to him by duty and affection. The moon hung low over the Takeda estate, spilling pale silver light across the courtyard and illuminating the koi pond in gentle ripples. Haru stepped quietly through the shadows, drawn by the faint glow of lanterns that flickered against the screens. The night seemed to hold its breath, as if the world itself waited for the confessions it had long avoided. Ayame stood near the edge of the pond, her white silk robes catching the moonlight like water. Her eyes were steady, yet behind them lingered a question, a vulnerability rarely seen in her public demeanour. Haru approached cautiously, knowing that this moment required balance. A truth spoken too freely could shatter the delicate threads of the household. "Haru-sama," she began softly, her voice carrying over the gentle ripple of water. "I have felt curiosity, and perhaps more, about you, about what lies beneath the obligations you carry. I wish to understand you, not just as my husband, but as the man beneath your armour." Haru bowed slightly, feeling the weight and warmth of her words. "Lady Ayame, your honesty honours me. I too feel the burden of duty, but I have begun to recognise the quiet stirrings of the heart that exist even amidst obligation." A pause lingered between them, filled only by the soft rustle of silk and the distant hum of cicadas. For the first time, Haru allowed himself to acknowledge the fragile connection forming with his bride, a recognition that intimacy could exist within the boundaries of respect and ceremony. Before he could respond further, a shadow moved from the veranda. Kiyomi appeared, her crimson robes blending with the darkness, eyes bright with a mixture of courage and vulnerability. "Haru-sama," she said, voice low, "I know my place here, yet I cannot hide what I feel entirely." your presence. It awakens something I cannot name, yet I honour the boundaries of this household and the life we all must lead." Haru's pulse quickened. Desire, duty, and loyalty all collided in the silvered night. He realised that the connections he shared were not singular. They were layered, intricate, and impossible to separate without consequence. Finally, Akio appeared, kneeling quietly at the edge of the garden. "Haru-sama," he whispered, "I have served and watched, and I care, as you know. My loyalty is unwavering, yet my heart—" He paused, bowing his head in humility. "I cannot hide it entirely, even if I must walk in the shadows." Haru took a slow breath, feeling the weight of 3 hearts intertwined with his own. He understood then that intimacy was not a single act or feeling. It was a spectrum, delicate and varied, requiring courage, discretion, and wisdom. "Tonight," Haru said finally, "we acknowledge these truths, not to act rashly, but to understand. Duty binds us, yet the heart speaks in its own time. We must navigate both with care, honour, and respect for one another." The moonlight cast long shadows across the courtyard, but in the silver glow a fragile understanding blossomed. Each person, Ayame, Kiyomi, Akio, had spoken a piece of the truth, and Haru felt the threads connecting them, intricate and delicate yet real. In the quiet that followed, no words were necessary. They shared the stillness, the acknowledgement of hidden desires and steadfast duty, the unspoken promise to move forward with care. Outside, the cicada's song continued unbroken, but within the garden, hearts beat in synchrony with patience, longing, and the slow unfolding of understanding. The first snow had fallen quietly over the Takeda estate, blanketing rooftops and gardens in pristine white. Lanterns glowed softly against the icy air, reflecting on frost-covered ponds and casting warm, golden halos on the snow-laden paths. The festival was underway, celebrations of winter, renewal, and the fleeting beauty of each snowflake. But to Haru, it felt like a mirror of the household itself, delicate, beautiful, and brimming with tension. Ayame walked beside him, her breath forming pale clouds in the cold air. Her white robes blended with the snow, giving her the appearance of a spirit rising from the winter mist. Haru noted the faint stiffness in her posture, a mixture of composure and unease, as if the crisp air reminded her of the delicate balance they maintained. Kiyomi followed, her crimson kimono a bold contrast against the white landscape. She moved gracefully, carrying a small lantern that flickered like the quiet warmth of her presence. Every glance she gave Haru carried meaning, unspoken, restrained, yet impossible to ignore. The festival was lively. Children skated on frozen ponds, merchants sold delicate confections, and performers in colourful robes moved among the crowd with practised skill. Yet beneath the joyous spectacle, Haru sensed the subtle currents of observation, the careful eyes of courtiers, retainers, and visitors, all measuring, evaluating, and recording the small gestures of nobility. During the ceremonial snow lantern release, Haru watched the lights drift into the frozen night sky, reflecting in Ayame's eyes. She turned to him, voice soft but steady. "Even in beauty there is fragility. We must remember that every choice we make is mirrored, observed, and weighed." Haru nodded. "Yes, and yet the snow reminds us that fleeting moments of grace can exist, even in the coldest conditions. We must cherish them, even if they are temporary." Kiyomi approached, kneeling beside a small lantern she had prepared. "Then let this one carry patience," she whispered, "and understanding for what must remain unspoken." Her eyes met his briefly, conveying a world of emotion restrained by duty and circumstance. Akio watched silently from the shadows of the pavilion, his presence a quiet reminder of loyalty and the delicate threads that bound the household together. Haru felt the pull of all three hearts intertwined with his own, each offering connection, desire, or steadfastness in different forms. The snow continued to fall, each flake a tiny reminder of impermanence, beauty, and the fleeting nature of all things. Haru understood then that the festival was more than celebration. It was a reflection of his life. Each step required caution, awareness, and respect. Each interaction carried weight. Each fleeting moment of intimacy was both precious and perilous. As the lanterns floated upward, disappearing into the cold, starless sky, Haru felt the fragile balance of his household pressing against him. Desire, duty, and loyalty interwoven like the drifting snowflakes around them. And in that quiet, crystalline moment, he realized that navigating these relationships required as much precision, patience, and skill as wielding a sword on the battlefield. The night deepened, and the estate slowly emptied, leaving only the soft crunch of footsteps in the snow. Haru paused to look back at the lanterns reflecting on the frozen pond, knowing that the bonds of his household had been tested tonight, and that the coming days would demand even greater care, courage, and understanding. The Takeda estate was quiet under a blanket of snow, but silence rarely meant peace. The halls, though empty of servants at that hour, seemed alive with unspoken words, glances exchanged in shadow, and secrets carefully hidden behind paper screens. Haru walked deliberately through the inner corridors, feeling the weight of the household pressing subtly against him. Ayame had retreated to her chambers after the festival, leaving behind a faint trace of jasmine and candle smoke. Kiyomi's crimson robes had disappeared into her own wing, yet her presence lingered, as did the careful, deliberate pull of her attention. Even Akio, loyal and observant, seemed sharper tonight, attuned to the smallest disturbances in the household's rhythm. A faint rustle caught Haru's attention. Behind a half-open screen, he glimpsed a folded note, hastily placed on a low table. Carefully he retrieved it, recognizing Ayame's delicate script. The words were personal, fragile, and tinged with emotion. Haru-sama, I struggle to understand the boundaries of duty and desire. I wish for clarity, for trust, for a connection beyond protocol. Yet I fear the consequences of exposing what lies in my heart. Haru's chest tightened. He understood that the household's quiet moments were often charged with more than etiquette. Desire, loyalty, and caution intertwined like threads in a tapestry, and one misstep could unravel the carefully maintained balance. Later, in the private garden, Kiyomi approached him, her crimson kimono stark against the snow. She moved with a grace that was both natural and deliberate, kneeling at a respectful distance. Haru-sama, she whispered, the household watches and speaks even in silence. We navigate shadows, yet the heart is not so easily restrained. Haru nodded slowly. He realized that the three threads, Ayame's measured grace, Kiyomi's quiet allure, and Akio's steadfast loyalty, were beginning to intersect in ways that could no longer remain fully hidden. Each carried desire and restraint, devotion and curiosity, yet all moved carefully in the space between protocol and personal longing. That night, Akio brought another subtle warning. Haru-sama, some alliances in the household are shifting. I sense tension rising, glances and whispers that carry meanings beyond our observation. Haru's gaze lifted toward the snow-covered roof, the moonlight reflecting off frozen tiles. We must proceed with care, he said. Each heart in this house is a flame. To protect them, and ourselves, we must understand their patterns, their needs, and the boundaries that cannot be crossed. The cicada's song was replaced by the crisp hush of winter air, yet the rhythm of the household continued, silent, observant, and delicate. Secrets, like snowflakes, settled in the quiet corners, waiting for the warmth of exposure to reveal their shapes. Haru felt the fragile tension pressing in. knowing that winter's stillness was temporary and that every hidden desire or alliance could soon come to light. In the solitude of his chamber, Haru pressed his hand to the hidden poem beneath his pillow, feeling the weight of responsibility and longing intertwined. Winter had a way of revealing truths, he realized, and the days ahead would test both his skill in navigating duty and his courage in honouring the hearts that depended on him. The snow from the previous night had hardened into a crisp, glimmering layer, turning the estate gardens into a frozen mirror of the world above. Haru walked slowly along the main path, the snap of ice beneath his sandals echoing in the still morning air. The festival and the whispered secrets of winter had left their mark on the household, and each step seemed to carry the weight of reflection. Ayame was already in the garden, her white silk robes blending with the frost. She knelt beside a small stone basin, letting her hands hover over the frozen water. Haru paused, observing the delicate patterns of ice forming along the surface. The reflection of the sky above and the garden around her seemed to echo her inner state, composed, yet layered with hidden complexities. "Haru-sama," she said softly, glancing at him. "The stillness of winter brings clarity, does it not? We see ourselves reflected, though the image is fragile and easily altered." Haru stepped closer, careful not to disturb the quiet balance. "Yes," he replied. "The reflections show more than the surface. They reveal the layers we carry, the obligations, the desires, the truths we hide even from ourselves." Kiyomi appeared silently, her crimson robe stark against the frozen landscape. She knelt opposite Haru, placing a small lantern in the snow. Its glow shimmered against the icy ground, casting long, dancing reflections across their faces. "And yet," she murmured, "sometimes the truth is clearer in shadow than in light. It is in stillness that we see what cannot be spoken." Akio joined them a few steps behind, kneeling in respectful distance. His eyes followed the subtle interactions between Haru, Ayame, and Kiyomi, aware of the unspoken tensions and loyalties that bound them. "We all carry our own reflections," he said softly, "and yet they intertwine in ways we cannot ignore. What we choose to reveal and what we withhold shapes the path ahead. The three threads of Haru's life, his wife, the concubine, and his loyal attendant, stood before him like reflections in the frozen pond. Each one mirrored a different facet of his heart: restraint, desire, devotion. The ice beneath them seemed to hum with the delicate tension of unspoken truths, revealing the fragility of the balance he sought to maintain. Haru knelt beside the basin, letting his hand hover over the frozen surface. For a moment, the reflection fractured as a thin layer of frost cracked under his touch. He realized then that reflection was not merely observation, it was confrontation. To see oneself clearly was to face both the heart's desires and the obligations of duty. "Winter teaches us," he said, lifting his gaze to meet theirs. "It teaches patience, observation, and courage. We must navigate these reflections carefully, acknowledging what we feel, what we must protect, and the consequences of our choices." As the morning light grew stronger, the ice glimmered like fractured glass. Yet within the shards, the world and their hearts were clearly visible. Haru understood that clarity could be both beautiful and dangerous, and that the path forward required wisdom, honesty, and the careful balancing of all that lay before him. The snow continued to glisten in silence, a mirror of the household itself, fragile, intricate, and quietly waiting for the warmth of resolution to reveal its truths. The estate was cloaked in fresh snow, deeper and quieter than before. The cold pressed against the paper screens, and every footstep on the garden paths left a crisp, audible mark. Haru moved carefully through the courtyard, aware of the stillness that made each sound sharper, each presence more immediate. Winter had become a mirror, reflecting hidden truths that could no longer remain buried. Ayame awaited him near the edge of the frozen pond, her breath forming small clouds in the frosty air. She held a folded note in her hands, one she had hesitated to send for days. Finally, the weight of unspoken words pressed her forward. Haru approached, sensing the tension, the delicate urgency beneath her calm exterior. "Haru-sama," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I can no longer keep these thoughts to myself. They are mine, yet they affect us all, and I fear the silence may harm what we cherish." He took a slow breath, kneeling beside her, aware of the fragile boundary between propriety and intimacy. "Speak freely, Lady Ayame. Whatever is on your heart will not be cast aside lightly." Her eyes met his, steady now despite the tremor of emotion. "I feel admiration, respect, and a growing affection, not just as your wife, but as a woman who sees you beyond duty and ceremony. I cannot claim to know what the future holds, but I cannot deny these feelings any longer." Haru felt the snow around them soften, as though the world itself was listening. He reached for her hand, careful, restrained, yet acknowledging the bond forming in the cold light of winter. "Ayame, your words honour me. I too am learning to navigate the heart beneath a duty, and what I feel is more than I had allowed myself to recognize." At that moment, Kiyomi emerged from the shadowed path, her crimson robes vibrant against the white snow. She knelt a respectful distance away, her eyes bright with courage. "Haru-sama," she said softly, "I cannot hide my feelings either. I understand my place, yet I cannot deny that your presence stirs something in me I cannot ignore." Akio appeared as well, silent and steady, kneeling slightly behind the others. "Haru-sama," he said, voice low but firm, "my loyalty endures, yet my heart, I cannot hide it, even if I must walk in the shadows." The snowbound garden became a stage for confessions long withheld, a frozen tableau of honesty, desire, and loyalty. Haru felt the weight of each heart intertwined with his own, and he understood that the household's delicate equilibrium had shifted. The warmth of acknowledgement had replaced hesitation, yet with it came responsibility, awareness, and the necessity of careful navigation. "Tonight," Haru said finally, "we have spoken truths. We have acknowledged what lies in our hearts, yet we must also honour duty, loyalty, and the fragile balance of this household. Desire need not be discarded, but it must be tempered with wisdom and respect." The snow continued to fall gently, dusting their robes and the frozen pond. In the quiet, they shared a fragile understanding, a recognition that intimacy, loyalty, and desire could coexist if navigated with care. Outside, the world moved on, indifferent, but within the Takeda estate, hearts had opened in the stillness, illuminating the path forward, however uncertain it might be. The morning sun glinted off snow-laden rooftops, casting sharp reflections across the Takeda estate. Within the inner halls, the household was stirring, yet the air was heavy with unspoken understanding. The confessions of the previous night had left ripples that reached far beyond the garden's frozen pond. Haru moved quietly through the corridors, observing subtle changes. A glance held a little longer, a bow slightly more deliberate, a silence more thoughtful than usual. He understood then that loyalty was not simply obedience, it was awareness, devotion, and the careful navigation of hearts that were both fragile and steadfast. Ayame approached him in the tea room, her usual grace tempered by newfound vulnerability. "Haru-sama," she said softly, "last night clarified much. I am willing to trust, to act with care, and to follow the path our hearts must take alongside duty." Haru nodded. "And I will honour that trust, Lady Ayame. Your presence and loyalty are invaluable, and I will tread carefully as we navigate this balance." Later, in the outer gardens, Kiyomi moved among the stone lanterns, her steps light but purposeful. Haru watched from a distance as she adjusted the placement of a small lantern, her crimson robes a vivid contrast against the white snow. When their eyes met, she inclined her head. "Haru-sama, I am committed to serving this household, yet I must also honour the emotions we acknowledged. My loyalty does not falter, though my heart may wander in quiet acknowledgement of what has been spoken." Akio remained vigilant, observing both Haru and the women, aware of the subtle tensions and the unfolding dynamics. "Haru-sama," he said quietly, "loyalty is tested not only by action, but by understanding. We are bound to you, yet we each carry hearts that speak in their own language." Haru realized then that the threads of loyalty were delicate, yet strong, woven from duty, respect, love, and unspoken desire. Every choice, every glance, every word had the potential to strengthen or unravel the weave. That evening, as the household gathered for supper, Haru noted the subtle shifts. Ayami's measured attentiveness, Kiyomi's quiet presence, and Akio's steadfast observation. The confessions had created a new equilibrium, one that required constant care, patience, and mindfulness. The threads were stronger for being acknowledged, yet more complex than ever. Haru reflected on the lessons winter had brought: clarity through reflection, courage in confession, and wisdom in balancing hearts and duty. He understood that the path ahead would demand vigilance, yet it also offered a rare opportunity to cultivate intimacy, trust, and loyalty within a household shaped by protocol, desire, and subtle human truths. Outside, the snow glimmered under the lantern light, each flake a reminder that beauty and fragility coexisted. Inside, the Takeda estate moved forward, hearts intertwined and aware, walking the delicate line between devotion, affection, and responsibility. The morning light filtered softly through the paper screens, illuminating the quiet stillness of the Takeda estate. Haru summoned Ayame, Kiyomi, and Akio to the inner hall, a rare gathering without ceremony or spectators. The air was heavy with the weight of previous confessions, tempered by the need for order and mutual understanding. Haru seated himself at the low table, the snow-dusted courtyard visible through the open screens behind him. "Last night," he began, voice steady, "we acknowledged truths long withheld. Hearts were revealed, and loyalty affirmed. Yet acknowledgement alone is insufficient. We must define how these truths coexist with duty, respect, and the responsibilities that bind us." Ayame inclined her head gracefully. "Haru-sama, I am ready to honour this accord. I will act with discretion, uphold my role, and balance my heart with the obligations I carry." Kiyomi lowered her gaze respectfully, her crimson sleeves brushing the tatami. "And I," she said softly, "will maintain my position, serve this household faithfully, and temper my emotions with awareness of what must remain, unspoken. Even as I recognize what has been revealed, Akio's presence was quiet but steady." "Haru-sama, my loyalty endures," he affirmed. "I will serve, observe, and support the household, while acknowledging the truths that have come to light. The accord will guide our actions and protect what we value most." Haru exhaled slowly, feeling the subtle weight of unity and understanding settling over the room. "This winter accord," he said, "is not a binding contract in ink, but a mutual commitment to act with discretion, to honour one another's hearts, and to maintain the integrity of our household above all. Desire need not be denied, but it must be navigated with wisdom and care." The three nodded in unison, a silent affirmation that the fragile threads of trust, loyalty, and affection were now acknowledged, interwoven with clarity. Haru felt a sense of relief, tempered by the awareness that human hearts were not static. They shifted, ebbed, and flowed like the snow outside. To commemorate the accord, they walked together through the courtyard, the morning sun glinting off frost-covered lanterns. Words were few, But understanding was clear. Every glance, every gesture carried intention, awareness, and respect. The winter accord had transformed the household's dynamics, turning tension into careful balance and unspoken desire into acknowledged restraint. As Haru returned to his chamber afterward, he reflected on the lessons of winter, reflection, confession, and the courage to navigate hearts alongside duty. The snow outside glimmered like a reminder that beauty, fragility, and clarity coexist, and that the path forward required vigilance, patience, and the quiet strength to uphold the harmony they had forged together. The Takeda estate was calm, yet the quiet carried a tension that could not be ignored. Winter's clarity had given way to lingering shadows, and even the winter accord could not entirely contain the stirrings of the heart. Haru moved through the halls, sensing subtle shifts, glances that lingered too long, silences heavy with thought, and the unspoken pull of emotions restrained but persistent. Ayami appeared in the inner garden, her white robes dusted with frost. She moved deliberately, tending to a small arrangement of winter flowers that clung stubbornly to life despite the cold. Her composure remained impeccable, yet Haru could detect the faint warmth in her gaze, the trace of longing that neither words nor decorum could fully conceal. "Haru-sama," she said softly, "even within duty, desire finds its way. I feel it, though I strive to temper it. The accord guides us, yet the heart speaks regardless of restraint." Haru knelt beside her, careful not to disturb the fragile blooms. "Yes, Ayame. The heart is persistent, yet it must be balanced. Desire need not vanish, but it must be tempered by wisdom, honor, and respect for one another." From the shadows, Kiyomi watched, crimson robes contrasting sharply against the muted tones of the garden. Her eyes lingered on Haru for a moment longer than courtesy allowed. "Haru-sama," she murmured, "I too feel the echoes of what has been acknowledged. They rise quietly, testing our boundaries, reminding us that restraint is never simple." Akio appeared silently behind the veranda, his loyalty unwavering, yet his presence a subtle reminder of fidelity and devotion. "Haru-sama," he said softly, "we are bound by more than words. Our hearts may speak in echoes, yet action and discretion remain our guide." Haru realized then that the winter accord had not erased desire. It had only given it a form, a careful channel through which it could exist without fracturing the household. But echoes persisted, soft yet insistent, reminding him that vigilance, reflection, and communication would always be necessary. Later, as snowflakes drifted gently onto the courtyard, Haru stood silently, observing the interplay of warmth and distance between Ayame and Kiyomi. He understood that desire, even restrained, was a force both powerful and subtle. Its presence required acknowledgement without yielding control, a delicate balance between heart and duty. In the stillness of the Takeda estate, the echoes of desire whispered through the halls like the winter wind, soft, persistent, and impossible to ignore. Haru knew that maintaining harmony required constant awareness, empathy, and the courage to navigate the currents of the human heart without faltering. The snow outside glimmered in the lantern light, a reminder that beauty and fragility coexist, and that even in stillness, the heart's quiet stirrings must be recognized, respected, and carefully guided. The Takeda estate was quiet at first, the kind of calm that precedes disruption. Snow clung stubbornly to rooftops, yet inside the halls, invisible currents of tension had grown stronger. Haru moved through the corridors with measured steps, sensing the subtle friction in every glance and gesture. Small signs that the accord, however carefully maintained, was being tested. Ayame's composure, while still impressive, showed faint cracks. She lingered longer in her chambers, her hands busy with needlework, yet her mind elsewhere. Haru noted the occasional pause in her movements, the way her gaze lingered toward him, or the garden, betraying the persistent echo of unspoken emotion. Kiyomi, ever graceful, began to appear more frequently in the inner courtyard, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of the delicate boundaries they all must uphold. Yet even her careful movements hinted at the growing tension beneath the household's veneer of order. Akio, loyal and steadfast, sensed the shifts too. He watched Haru, noting the subtle changes in posture, expression, and timing that betrayed the household's quiet unrest. "Haru-sama," he murmured one evening, "I fear that even the accord may not contain what lies beneath. Hearts, once stirred, demand attention, and restraint alone may not suffice." Haru understood. Desire, no matter how carefully tempered, had its own momentum. The careful weaving of loyalty and affection, of duty and longing, had begun to strain at the edges. Even with the winter accord in place, small fissures had begun to appear, and the weight of unspoken truths pressed harder with each passing day. The first real sign came one afternoon, in the tea room, when a minor misunderstanding spiraled quietly. A misplaced gesture, a misinterpreted glance, and the household felt the tension snap, however subtly. Words were chosen carefully, yet the undertone of emotion was impossible to suppress. Haru intervened, calm and deliberate, restoring order outwardly, but inwardly he knew that the breaking point was no longer far off. It was approaching, inevitable, and demanding resolution. Later that evening, Haru retreated to the garden. The snow reflected the pale moonlight, glinting like fractured glass. He paused, considering the delicate balance he must maintain. Desire, loyalty, and duty were no longer theoretical. They were active, tangible, pressing against one another in ways that required clarity, courage, and uncompromising wisdom. "Winter teaches patience," he murmured to himself, tracing patterns in the snow with a gloved hand. But even winter can break if the ice is too thin. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying the faintest echoes of footsteps and heartbeats within the household. The winter accord had held, but only just. Haru knew that the next days would demand decisions, choices that would define relationships, loyalty, and the very fabric of their home. The morning was unusually still, the snow from the previous night compressed into a crisp, silent blanket over the Takeda estate. Haru moved through the corridors, noting subtle shifts. Doors left slightly ajar, soft footsteps echoing in unexpected places, and glances exchanged in ways that were no longer purely ceremonial. Ayame emerged from the inner garden, carrying a small tray of tea. Her movements were deliberate, yet her eyes flickered toward Haru with a warmth that betrayed unspoken thoughts. At the same time, Kiyomi appeared at the far end of the hall, adjusting a lantern for morning light. Their paths were set to cross, and Haru could feel the tension of that moment even before it arrived. The encounter was quiet at first. Ayame paused mid-step, and Kiyomi stopped as well, both aware of the other's presence. Silence stretched between them, heavy with subtle emotion. The winter accord had provided a framework for harmony, yet it could not erase the pull of desire, the shadows of curiosity, or the delicate undercurrents of jealousy. Haru approached slowly, positioning himself between them, both literally and metaphorically. "Today," he said calmly, "we navigate more than routine duties. We must acknowledge that paths may cross, that feelings may surface, and that discretion is required to maintain the balance we have worked to achieve." Ayame inclined her head, her voice soft but firm. "Haru-sama, I understand." Yet these intersections remind us that hearts are not always easily guided. Even with understanding and accord, Kiyomi's gaze met Ayame's for a brief, measured moment. "We must trust the accord and one another," she said quietly. "But trust does not prevent emotion from arising. It only teaches us how to respond with care." Akio observed from the veranda, silent but alert, sensing every nuance of gesture, expression, and hesitation. His loyalty was unwavering, but he understood that these crossed paths were testing the equilibrium of the household. Even small missteps could ripple outward. creating unforeseen consequences. As the three interacted, Haru realized that the winter accord was both resilient and fragile. The structure of their relationships could accommodate these crossings, yet the emotional undercurrents were persistent, unyielding, and at times unpredictable. Each glance, each measured word, became a test of patience, insight, and restraint. Later, in the courtyard, snowflakes drifted softly, dissolving as they touched warm surfaces. Haru reflected on the morning's events, understanding that crossed paths were inevitable. Desire, loyalty, and duty would always intersect, but awareness and careful navigation could transform potential conflict into understanding, tension into connection, and restraint into respect. The day continued with quiet activity, but within the hearts of Ayame, Kiyomi, Akio, and Haru, the echoes of crossed paths lingered, a reminder that the bonds they had formed were alive, dynamic, and requiring constant attention. Harmony was not a state, but a practice, one that demanded vigilance, empathy, and courage at every turn. The Takeda estate, once serene under snow and lantern light, now felt heavier, as if the very walls absorbed the quiet tensions that had been simmering for weeks. Haru moved through the inner corridors with measured steps, aware that the harmony maintained by the winter accord was showing signs of strain. Ayami was in her chambers, her movements precise, yet a subtle agitation lingered. The morning's cross-path encounters had left ripples in her composure, and even the decorum she meticulously upheld could not completely mask the stirrings of the heart. Kiyomi, meanwhile, had spent the day in the garden arranging lanterns, each placement careful, deliberate, but each glance she cast toward Haru betrayed a pull that was becoming harder to restrain. The balance between desire and duty, though still intact, was increasingly precarious. Even Akio sensed the subtle fractures emerging. His loyalty remained steadfast, yet he noted how small gestures, misplaced words, fleeting glances, quiet sighs were beginning to accumulate, testing the boundaries of patience and understanding. By late afternoon, the first true tension surfaced. A minor disagreement over household duties escalated quietly, but the undercurrent of emotion lent it an intensity that startled even Haru. Words were chosen carefully, yet the voices trembled slightly, the gestures sharper than intended. He intervened with calm authority, restoring order externally, but internally he knew that the equilibrium was teetering. Later, alone in the garden, Haru observed the snow-laden branches glimmering in late sunlight. He reflected on the nature of restraint, the fragility of the winter accord, and the invisible threads connecting Ayame, Kiyomi, and Akio. Even with care, desire persisted, loyalty carried complexity, and duty demanded vigilance. "The accord holds," he murmured, tracing a pattern in the frost, "but only if hearts are acknowledged, boundaries respected, and courage maintained. Otherwise, it unravels." By evening, the household had settled externally, yet the echoes of the day lingered in quiet corners, in fleeting glances and in subtle hesitations. Haru understood that the coming days would demand clarity, confrontation, and choices that could define the future of the household. Winter's stillness had taught patience, reflection, and careful observation, but now, as the sun set behind frost-covered rooftops, the lessons of restraint and desire would be tested in ways that could no longer be contained. Night had fallen over the Takeda estate, casting long shadows across snow-dusted courtyards and lantern-lit corridors. The stillness of winter, which had once offered reflection and clarity, now carried a charged tension that pressed against every room, every heart, every unspoken word. Haru moved deliberately through the inner halls, senses alert. The echoes of the previous days, the cross-paths, confessions, and subtle rivalries had coalesced into a moment that could no longer be deferred. He knew that tonight, restraint alone would not suffice. Truth had to be confronted. Ayame waited in the inner garden, her white robes glowing faintly under lantern light. Her hands were clasped, yet there was a tremor in her posture, a mixture of anticipation, fear, and resolve. "Haru-sama," she said softly, "we cannot continue as if nothing has changed. We must speak openly, or the harmony we seek will fracture." From the shadowed veranda, Kiyomi emerged, crimson robes vivid against the snow. Her eyes met Ayami's briefly, then shifted to Haru. "Haru-sama," she said quietly, "we have navigated our feelings carefully, but silence can no longer contain them. The truth must be faced, whatever the consequences." Akio, ever vigilant, knelt nearby, his posture calm but his eyes sharp. "Haru-sama, the time has come to reconcile duty with desire, loyalty with honesty. We are bound by more than words, yet these unspoken tensions demand acknowledgement." Haru took a measured breath, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing upon him. "Then let us speak," he said, "not to assign blame, but to understand, to acknowledge, and to navigate what has long been hidden. Tonight, we confront not only one another, but also the truths within our own hearts." What followed was a delicate and intense exchange, words chosen with care, gestures revealing emotion, and silences weighted with meaning. Confessions, jealousies, and long-suppressed desires surfaced, intertwining with loyalty, respect, and the enduring bonds of the household. By the time the moon reached its zenith, the confrontation had yielded clarity. Boundaries were redefined, intentions made explicit, and the winter accord, though tested, was reinforced through honesty rather than suppression. Haru realized that confrontation, though unsettling, had strengthened the fabric of the household, making it resilient to the subtle storms of desire and doubt. As the night deepened, the snow glimmered softly, mirroring the quiet resolution within the Takeda estate. Hearts had been laid bare, loyalties affirmed, and the path forward, though still delicate, was now guided by understanding, courage, and mutual respect. The first light of dawn spilled across the Takeda estate, softening the frost and casting a gentle glow on snow-covered rooftops. Inside, the household stirred with a renewed sense of purpose, the tension of the previous night replaced by quiet reflection and a cautious optimism. Haru moved through the inner halls, observing the subtle but meaningful changes. Ayame walked with a serenity that seemed to radiate from within, her composure complemented by a newfound warmth in her eyes. She acknowledged Haru with a nod, one that carried gratitude, understanding, and trust. Kiyomi, too, moved with deliberate grace. The crimson of her robes remained striking against the morning light, but there was no longer an edge of tension in her demeanour. Each gesture and glance now spoke of clarity and intention, rather than suppressed longing or uncertainty. Akio observed from his usual place near the veranda, vigilant, yet relaxed. The weight of yesterday's confrontations seemed to have shifted into a shared understanding, reinforcing both loyalty and discretion. "Haru-sama," he said quietly, "the household breathes more freely today." The accord endures. Strengthened by acknowledgement and honesty, Haru felt a quiet relief settle over him. The winter accord was no longer a fragile framework. It had evolved into a living understanding, forged through confrontation, reflection, and mutual respect. Desire, loyalty, and duty could coexist when met with awareness, patience, and courage. The day progressed with calm routines, yet every small act was infused with a subtle attentiveness, a bow held slightly longer in acknowledgement, a shared glance across the tea room, a quiet word of encouragement. Harmony was being rebuilt, not imposed, and it flourished in the spaces created by honesty and trust. In the courtyard, the snow began to melt slightly under the morning sun, the frozen surfaces giving way to reflective pools. Haru watched the shifting patterns, understanding that relationships, like winter ice, required both careful navigation and the warmth of attention to thrive without breaking. As evening approached, the household gathered quietly for a shared meal, a ritual of togetherness that now carried the weight of acknowledgement and reconciliation. Conversation flowed with ease, gestures were more relaxed, and laughter, a soft, measured sound, echoed gently through the halls. Haru reflected on the lessons learned, that hearts must be acknowledged, boundaries respected, and desire tempered with discretion. Rebuilding harmony was not the end, but a continuous practice, one that required vigilance, empathy, and the courage to embrace both vulnerability and duty. Outside, the snow shimmered faintly in the lantern light, mirroring the renewed equilibrium within the Takeda estate. In that quiet glow, Haru recognized that true harmony was not absence of conflict, but the skillful navigation of hearts, responsibilities, and the delicate threads that bound them together. Morning light filtered through frosted windows, illuminating the quiet rhythms of the household. Snow still clung to the eaves and courtyard stones, but inside, warmth and measured activity filled the rooms. Haru observed from the veranda, noting how the past weeks of tension and confession had shifted the energy of those around him. Ayame moved gracefully among the tea trays, her careful gestures now infused with ease rather than restraint. Each movement seemed intentional, reflective, and quietly confident, a sign that she had internalized both the lessons of desire and the necessity of restraint. Kiyomi tended to the lanterns in the inner garden, adjusting them with precision and care. The soft light glimmered on the snow, reflecting her quiet determination to honour the accord while acknowledging her own heart. Every placement spoke of thoughtfulness and awareness, a subtle embodiment of harmony in action. Even Akio's presence seemed lighter, less of a silent observer and more of a stabilizing force within the household. His vigilance remained, but it was now paired with a measured understanding that restraint and honesty were not mutually exclusive. Haru stepped into the garden, letting his eyes trace the delicate patterns of frost and reflection. Winter had taught him much: the power of patience, the necessity of honesty, and the careful balancing act required to navigate both desire and duty. Each snowflake, ephemeral yet precise, mirrored the fragility and beauty of human connection. He addressed the household quietly, choosing words that were measured yet resonant. We have learned that hearts, though persistent, can be guided with awareness. Duty need not suppress desire, nor can affection exist without mindfulness. Our harmony depends not only on what we acknowledge, but on how we act upon it. Ayame met his gaze, a subtle smile playing at her lips. We carry the lessons forward, Haru-sama. Winter has shown us clarity, and now we must apply it daily, in every gesture, every word, every thought. Kiyomi nodded, her eyes reflecting the lantern light. And we must remain vigilant, she added. Even when harmony is restored, life will present challenges that test both patience and courage. Haru felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered with awareness. Winter's lessons were not about perfection, but understanding. The awareness that human hearts are both resilient and delicate, and that every act of honesty, every conscious choice, could strengthen the threads of trust and loyalty that bound them. As the day progressed, small moments of grace emerged, laughter shared over tea, quiet acknowledgements of effort, and a renewed sense of connection that required neither ceremony nor artifice. The household moved together in subtle harmony, each member carrying the lessons of winter within themselves. Outside, the snow shimmered softly under the morning light, glimmering like fragments of wisdom scattered across the world. Haru knew that the lessons of winter would endure long after the frost melted, guiding both action and heart with clarity, patience, and care. A pale sunlight filtered through the thin veil of morning clouds, melting patches of frost along the garden paths. The hush of winter was softening, and with it came subtle shifts in the household's energy. Haru noticed it immediately, the way gestures lingered slightly longer, the way glances carried quiet questions, and how silences, once comfortable, now hinted at small frictions waiting to surface. Ayame was arranging fresh flowers in the inner hall when a slip of paper, long overlooked, fluttered from a cabinet. Its words were innocent, mundane even, yet the timing gave them weight, a reminder of past misunderstandings, lingering doubts, or the small unresolved tensions that winter had only temporarily subdued. Kiyomi appeared from the veranda, adjusting a lantern's angle in the soft sunlight. She paused at the paper on the floor, her expression thoughtful. "Even with harmony restored," she murmured, "small frictions remind us that balance is not static." "We must remain mindful, even in calm moments," Akio observed quietly, noting the subtle interactions between Ayame, Kiyomi, and Haru. Loyalty had endured, but human hearts were restless. Even the most carefully navigated accord could face tests as circumstances shifted. "Haru-sama," he said softly, "these gentle tensions are not failures. They are opportunities. How we respond now will determine whether harmony deepens or falters." Haru knelt to retrieve the paper, recognizing its symbolic weight more than its literal content. "You're correct, Akio," he said. "Balance is a living practice. Friction reveals what requires attention, patience, and deliberate understanding. Even small moments of disruption carry lessons if we observe carefully." Later, the three of them gathered in the courtyard, where patches of snow were giving way to damp earth. They spoke quietly, openly acknowledging residual discomforts and clarifying intentions. Laughter emerged over a minor misunderstanding, breaking the tension and reinforcing trust. Gestures that might have carried suspicion now carried acknowledgement, empathy, and care. Haru observed, heart steady, as warmth returned naturally to the household. The thawing of winter's tension did not erase past challenges. It illuminated them, offering insight and guiding renewed awareness. The threads of loyalty, affection, and restraint were no longer delicate by accident. They were resilient, strengthened by observation and thoughtful action. As evening approached, the glow of lanterns reflected in puddles of melted frost. Haru knew that the subtle tests of thawing tensions were a necessary rhythm of life, reminders that harmony, once achieved, required ongoing attention, empathy, and courage. The household's equilibrium was not permanent, but its members were now equipped to navigate shifts with patience and insight. Sunlight spilled through the shoji screens, illuminating the inner halls with a warm glow that seemed to breathe life into the quiet household. Haru watched as Ayame moved among the rooms, her gestures graceful and assured, each action reflecting a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. Kiyomi tended to the garden paths, placing lanterns with thoughtful precision. Her movements were deliberate, yet her composure hinted at a subtle lightness, a sense that the burdens of previous tensions had eased, replaced by clarity and intention. Akio observed both silently, noting the harmony that now existed alongside vigilance. The household no longer relied solely on restraint. They relied on understanding, acknowledgement, and active participation in maintaining equilibrium. Haru gathered them in the main hall, a quiet ritual of reflection and affirmation. "We have navigated confession, confrontation, and the subtle tests of tension," he began, "and we have emerged with clarity. Our bonds are strengthened not through avoidance, but through attention, patience, and honesty." Ayame inclined her head, her eyes bright. "Haru-sama, we have learned to trust, not only in the accord or in each other, but in the strength of our hearts to act with wisdom." Kiyomi added, "The lessons of winter and the thaw remind us that balance requires constant care. Strengthening bonds is an ongoing practice, not a final state." Even Akio nodded, silent but expressive in his acknowledgement. "True harmony," he said quietly, is forged in the way we navigate both the calm and the friction. Our loyalty and understanding are now intertwined. Resilient against the quiet tests that life may present, Haru felt a rare sense of peace. The threads of desire, loyalty and duty had been examined, refined and consciously strengthened. Each member of the household had internalized the lessons of honesty, reflection and careful navigation, creating a foundation that could endure both subtle storms and open challenges. The day passed in quiet activity, each small gesture reinforcing shared understanding. Ayame's thoughtful attention to detail, Kiyomi's careful arrangements of light and shadow, and Akio's unwavering presence. Harmony had become active rather than passive, a living, evolving network of trust and awareness. As evening fell, lanterns glimmered along the courtyard paths, reflecting in puddles where the last frost had melted. Haru stood silently, observing the subtle interplay of movement, light, and attention. Bonds, he realized, were not static. They were a continual practice, strengthened through mindfulness, empathy, and courage. In the soft glow of the lanterns, the household moved as one, yet each member retained their individuality, their desires, and their wisdom. Harmony, nurtured and deliberate, had become a shared strength, a testament to the resilience and care that defined their lives together. The final snowflakes of the season drifted lazily from a pale sky, settling on rooftops and garden stones before melting into the earth. A crisp warmth hinted at the coming spring, carrying a sense of renewal and quiet anticipation. Haru walked along the courtyard, feeling the weight of reflection and the lightness of hope intertwined. Ayame appeared with a basket of fresh herbs, her movements fluid and confident. She paused, glancing at Haru, and offered a soft smile. "The season has passed, Haru-sama. Winter taught patience, reflection, and courage. Now we step into what comes next, carrying its lessons with us." Kiyomi adjusted the last lantern along the garden path, its gentle glow catching in the early sunlight. "Yes," she said, "we have learned to navigate our hearts alongside duty. Desire, loyalty, and responsibility are no longer in conflict. They coexist through understanding and care." Akio, ever vigilant, stood near the veranda, watching both the household and the slowly brightening sky. "The tests of winter have strengthened our bonds. Our accord is no longer fragile, it is resilient, shaped by honesty, attention, and deliberate action." Haru surveyed the household with a rare serenity. Winter had been more than a season. It had been a teacher. Confessions, tensions, confrontations, and reconciliations had tested them all, revealing both fragility and strength. Now, the household moved forward with clarity, unity, and mutual respect. He addressed them quietly, choosing words that carried both gratitude and resolve. "We have faced our desires, our doubts, and the subtle currents of tension that life places before us. Our harmony is not a gift of circumstance. It is a product of vigilance, empathy, and shared courage. Let us carry this into the coming seasons, honouring both our hearts and our duties." Ayame, Kiyomi, and Akio nodded in agreement, each understanding that the winter accord had become more than an arrangement. It was a living practice, a guide for action, and a testament to their collective wisdom. The courtyard shimmered as the last snow melted into reflective pools, catching the glow of morning light. Haru felt a sense of completion, not an ending, but a transition. Lessons had been learned, bonds had been strengthened, and the household was prepared for the future, whatever it might hold. As the sun climbed higher, casting warmth across the gardens and halls, Haru recognized the enduring truth of winter, that clarity emerges from reflection, strength is forged through challenge, and harmony is cultivated, not given. The season had ended, but its lessons would linger, shaping every choice, every glance, and every heartbeat within the household. In the soft light of a new day, Haru and those around him stepped forward together, steady, mindful, and ready for the promise of spring. The first morning of spring arrived with soft warmth and the scent of thawing earth. Patches of green broke through the melting snow, and the gardens seemed to breathe a quiet life back into the household. Haru walked along the stone path, feeling the subtle pulse of renewal in every detail. The gentle trickle of a stream, the stir of early buds, the delicate sunlight filtering through branches. Ayame emerged carrying a tray of tea, her composure calm yet vibrant. "Haru-sama," she said, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and hope. "We have endured winter's trials. Now we step into a new season, carrying its lessons and our strengthened bonds." Kiyomi adjusted a lantern, its soft glow harmonizing with the morning light. "Our hearts are steadier, our awareness deeper," she added. "What was tested has grown resilient, and the accord guides us with clarity and care." Akio, standing quietly near the veranda, nodded. Loyalty, desire, and responsibility are no longer at odds. We move forward together, mindful of the past, yet embracing the promise of what comes next. Haru paused in the garden, taking in the scene, the quiet rhythm of life restored, relationships strengthened, and the subtle balance of heart and duty maintained. He felt a rare, deep serenity. Winter had tested them, shaped them, and taught them the delicate art of navigating human connection. Now, with the season behind them, the household stood unified, prepared for whatever challenges and joys lay ahead. "Let us remember," Haru said softly, addressing all three, "that harmony is not a destination but a practice. We honour our desires, respect our duties, and carry forward the lessons we have learned. Together, we face the future, mindful, courageous, and united." The household exchanged smiles, small gestures of understanding and quiet acknowledgement. The garden shimmered with early sunlight, reflecting their renewed strength and the subtle promise of growth. As they moved through the morning, each step was measured yet free, a testament to the bonds they had forged and the wisdom they carried forward. So guys, thanks for sticking with me through this journey. Today, we saw how hearts, duty, and desire can coexist when guided by honesty, patience, and understanding. Winter tested our household, but through reflection, confrontation, and care, harmony was restored and bonds were strengthened. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into historical and emotional tales, and comment below with your favourite moment from Haru's journey. And remember, whether it's in a samurai household or your own life, true harmony comes from awareness, empathy, and the courage to face your heart honestly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.